Danielle never questioned the math, it was the people behind it she didn't trust. It all began on a Tuesday morning during one of those hollow corporate rallies, complete with stale donuts and forced enthusiasm. The new VP of Finance, Tyler, fresh out of business school and reeking of overconfidence and Axe body spray, paraded around with a flashy slide deck like he'd just discovered the cure for something. He preached, revenue up 18%, stable margins, no visible risks. It was all buzzwords and bravado. Sitting quietly in the back, Danielle, a 12-year veteran with a memory like a ledger, knew the numbers were doctored. Not a casual mistake. Not, forgot to double-check. These figures had been smoothed, stretched, and contorted like a Vegas illusion. She spotted a vendor contract that had expired 6 weeks ago still listed as active. Deferred maintenance costs had mysteriously disappeared. She raised her hand, her voice calm, even polite. "Has legal reviewed these figures?" she asked. Tyler shot her a smug smile, half frat boy, half motivational speaker. "Thanks, Danielle. We're all good." But they weren't. She could smell the rot behind the curtain. She didn't argue. Not yet. Danielle knew better than to stop the performance before the curtain dropped. Instead, she returned to her desk and began saving every document she could get her hands on, quietly, meticulously. And hey, while you're folding laundry, sitting in traffic, or hiding from your kids, real quick, 97% of you haven't hit that subscribe button. That number's uglier than Tyler's forecasting. Hit follow so you don't miss how Danielle flips this boardroom on its head in part 6. Danielle was the kind of compliance officer who never missed a decimal, never broke confidentiality, and never cried at her desk. HR called her low maintenance, leadership called her reliable. What they meant was, "We'll never promote you, but if you ever leave, we're screwed." She was the reason OSHA didn't come knocking. The reason SEC inquiries never stuck. The silent force keeping clueless executives from sending email chains that could land them in court. But because she didn't perform her competence in heels or rehearse her sentences in LinkedIn speak, she went unseen, until the day they decided to remove her. Tyler's arrival marked a sharp turn. Suddenly, reports bypassed her. Emails went unanswered. HR began talking about realignment and streamlining compliance under finance. Danielle could see the writing on the wall, written in Comic Sans by amateurs. But she didn't panic. She archived everything. Every revision, every adjustment, every chain of sign-offs. Including Clause 12b, a tiny safeguard she slipped into the compliance overhaul back in 2017, back when no one was paying attention. So when the email came about the Q2 alignment meeting, a corporate euphemism for slaughter, Danielle already knew. The room had the sterile buzz of a dentist's office. CFO Brad, hair that looked surgically imported from a villain's wig catalog, launched into empty words about efficiency. Tyler stood behind him like an intern at a funeral. By slide 3, the hammer dropped. Brad, in his best faux-concerned voice, informed Danielle her role was being absorbed under finance. Her service was deeply appreciated. She didn't blink. "Will there be severance?" she asked evenly. That single question derailed the room. Rick, the smug company lawyer, laughed out loud. Not uncomfortably. Not nervously. Like it was comedy night at a 1950s men's club. "Oh, Danielle," he chuckled. "Nobody negotiates severance here." That sentence burned into her like acid, etched in rage and memory. She said nothing. Just closed her notebook filled with margin notes from the last board report and waited. 3 minutes later, HR walked in with an envelope and a deactivated badge. The woman, young, nervous, clearly new, offered Danielle a box and a pity smile. "Let us know if you need help carrying anything." Danielle packed slowly. She took her diplomas off the wall. Unpinned a sticky note that read, check clause 12b, might need it someday, and slipped it in her purse like ammunition. They didn't shake her hand. She walked out under the hum of flickering fluorescents, past forgotten awards and an empty mug rack where her cup had already been claimed. The world moved on like nothing had happened. But inside her, something coiled and ready ignited. Not loud. Not messy. Just a sharp, concentrated burn. They thought she'd crumble. That's the thing about men like Tyler, Rick, and Brad. They don't notice women like Danielle until the ground gives way beneath them. They mistake silence for submission. They never imagine it's a setup. That night, Danielle didn't cry. She sat at her kitchen table in sweatpants that still smelled like office carpet, staring at the laughable, off-boarding packet, 2 pages of corporate nonsense and a signature line. Next to it, a half-eaten burrito, a box of Franzia, and the heavy silence of someone who'd been erased. Her cat, Mij, jumped onto the counter and knocked over a pen. She didn't move. Maybe this was the end. Or maybe this was the beginning of the reckoning. Either way, Danielle wasn't broken. She was just getting started. She glanced back at the envelope. Inside, a single line jumped out. By signing, you agree to waive all claims related to your employment and termination. The corporate equivalent of, take your scraps and don't complain. She took a slow sip of wine, watching condensation slide down the glass. Her fingertip followed the drip like tracing a path through old memories, back to when no one cared what compliance did, so she rebuilt the department from nothing. Quietly. Thoroughly. And buried within that silence, protections no one noticed, because no one ever thought she mattered. That's when it hit her. Clause 12b. She whispered it like a spell. Clause 12b. A rainy Wednesday in 2017. The CFO back then wasn't Brad. He actually read things longer than a tweet and didn't think golf was a strategy. That month, Danielle had rewritten the entire risk policy. And tucked near the end of a 40-page document was a clause. One that guaranteed severance, plus triple back pay, if a restructuring followed a material misstatement of financials. At the time, it was just a safeguard. Now, it was a loaded weapon. She set her glass down, walked to the living room, and opened the fireproof box hidden behind her TV stand. Inside, 2 old thumb drives, labeled Archive and CYA. Her hands shook as she plugged one into her laptop. It whirred to life, memos, versions of forecasts, Excel files with timestamps, tracked edits on financial reports. Danielle's pulse steadied. This wasn't hope. This was firepower. And she knew exactly who to call. She hadn't spoken to Marcy in over a year, life had simply drifted them apart. But Marcy had once been her law school roommate. Fearless. Razor sharp. The type of woman who cross-examined a campus cop over a parking citation. Now, she was a partner at a boutique firm that specialized in employment law and corporate screw-ups. Danielle didn't hesitate. She dialed. Danielle Hartman, came the crisp answer. Please tell me this is about a spa weekend and not revenge. Danielle smiled faintly. Bit of both. Mostly revenge. Marcy didn't miss a beat. Tell me everything. So Danielle did. Slowly. File by file. Phrase by phrase. When she got to clause 12b, the line went quiet. Send me the language, Marcy finally said. Danielle forwarded it instantly. Marcy's next words made Danielle's wine glass tremble. Oh, honey, she said. This isn't just leverage. It's a goddamn thermonuclear warhead. And you've had it buried for 7 years. Danielle looked at the severance envelope again. Then calmly tossed it into the trash. Marcy called back before sunrise the next day. Danielle, still in a bathrobe, hair half up, coffee clenched like a lifeline, hadn't slept. just drifted between spreadsheets and the echo of Rick's smug laugh. No pleasantries, Marcy said. Clause 12B is bulletproof. If their earnings reports are off, even a little, and your role was axed afterward, they owe you severance, back pay, attorney fees. The works. Danielle didn't smile. Just said, let's start. Marcy's voice dropped. No press. No noise. Let them think you went quietly. And just like that, the war machine kicked into gear. Danielle unlocked every thumb drive, every encrypted zip file, every off-the-record memo she'd ever hoarded under the golden rule, cover your ass. It was like digging through her own digital black box. Audit trails, flagged edits, file versions so old they referenced Windows 7. If someone so much as breathed near a spreadsheet, she had it timestamped. Marcy built a secure shared folder, organized by date, subject, and exec sign-off. Surgical. Cold. Ruthless. There was no vengeance in her tone, just weaponized evidence. They compared Danielle's termination to Q1 and Q2 earnings reports. Found 4 major inconsistencies, 3 missing disclosures, and 1 devastating forecast edit made after the report was filed. When Marcy saw it, she only said one word, Jesus. Danielle took another sip of coffee. Then came the legal chess. Marcy filed what she called a quiet signal, a formal inquiry hand-delivered with all the subtlety of a scalpel. No threats. Just a calm, surgical question. Given the revised earnings and the timing of Ms. Hartman's restructuring, does Clause 12B now apply retroactively under current corporate policy? Sent directly to legal. CC'd to the board. BCC'd to an arbitration officer they knew didn't play games. Danielle's name wasn't even on it. Not yet. But within 2 days, the ripples hit. A vague HR email arrived. We're open to revisiting Miss Hartman's exit agreement and hope to reach a mutually beneficial resolution. Translation, they smelled smoke. Marcy rolled her eyes. Rick and Brad just realized there's a bomb under the table. Danielle didn't reply. She was already sifting through old emails from 6 months earlier. Found what she needed, a CFO memo on growth forecasts. Someone had added a comment, soften this. Too risky to admit debt restructuring. It was signed off by Rick with his usual smug, looks good. Ship it. Danielle saved it. This wasn't personal. It wasn't even emotional anymore. Every file was a scalpel. Every timestamp a stitch. She wasn't burning the house down. She was performing the autopsy. Marcy had the helm. Clause 12B was wired into the hull. And Danielle? She had nothing to prove, only to confirm. At 9:13 a.m. that Thursday, her phone rang. She ignored it. Danielle was watching reruns of Chopped, legal pad on her lap, calmly annotating a timeline while a chef tried to turn pickled squid into creme brulee. The phone rang again. And again. Then a voicemail. Hi Danielle, this is Trina from Employee Experience. We'd love to reopen dialogue around your exit process and discuss possible win-win solutions. She forwarded it to Marcy with one subject line, the dance begins. Marcy's reply came 20 minutes later. No emojis. No pleasantries. Just a 12-page legal memo, co-signed by 2 partners, citing case law, requesting subpoenas for financial disclosure logs. Internal communications about Danielle's termination. Revision history on the last 3 earnings reports. The attached cover letter was a masterpiece of polite venom. In the spirit of mutual benefit, we've enclosed documents that may help clarify our position. Danielle read it twice. Smiled. Not triumph. Not joy. It was colder than that. Like the sound of ice cracking on a frozen lake. By noon, her phone buzzed. One text. Unknown number, they're panicking. CFO said you had the nuke. She stared at it. Typed back, Danielle. Who is this? Unknown, you helped me fix my expense reports when Tyler told me to hide a vendor charge. I never forgot. Just, be careful. They're calling lawyers. Meetings are going late. Like, real late. Danielle exhaled, leaned back in her chair, and finally let herself feel it. Not rage. Not relief. Just that razor-thin breath between strategy and execution. Because now, she wasn't fighting alone. She had allies. And the storm hadn't even hit yet. She opened a fresh folder on her laptop. Named it simply, Whistleblower, Active. Then she got dressed, dark jeans, clean blazer, bare face. No armor, just precision. Drove to the local library like it was a casual errand. Found a private room, powered up her laptop, and went hunting. Deep inside her archived email backups, Danielle found what she'd hoped for. Rick, reckless and arrogant, had a bad habit of forwarding confidential reports to his personal Gmail to review over the weekend. Sloppy. Entitled. Convenient. Because before they cut her out, Danielle had copied the original server logs to her private drive. Marcy practically buzzed when she saw them, the kind of quiet excitement only lawyers and wolves get before a kill. This one, she said, pointing. This shows Rick reviewed the revised projections after the board meeting. That proves it wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. A deliberate attempt to mislead. Danielle asked the question like she didn't already know the answer. Is that enough to trigger Clause 12B? Marcy grinned. It's enough for 12B and a profile in Forbes, if we went public. But we won't. That's not the play. We let them hang slowly. By Friday, HR called again. This time the voicemail had a new tone. They called it a final opportunity to resolve in good faith. Danielle didn't bother forwarding it. Just logged the time, the date, and underlined final opportunity in her notebook. Because what they didn't realize was that her opportunity had only just begun. That same day, the company's quarterly report dropped with all the usual PR polish. Clean layout. Bulletproof jargon. But Danielle flipped straight to the footnotes, where the bodies are always buried. Page 37. Subsection 4C, subsequent to our Q1 filing, management has determined that earlier projections failed to reflect deferred liabilities related to equipment lease transitions. Adjustments have been made to present a more accurate representation of revenue growth. There it was. Flat. Sterile. Probably written mid-panic by some terrified lawyer, but it was the trigger. The exact scenario Clause 12B was written for, a material misstatement followed by departmental restructuring. Danielle screenshot it and sent it to Marcy. One word came back, go. By noon, the arbitration request had been submitted. Neutral ground. Private. No media. That was the strategy. No headlines. Just pressure. The venue was a law firm downtown, glass walls, steel chairs, fake succulents that looked like they'd given up. The AC was brutal, possibly out of spite. Paralegals moved through the halls like ghosts. At 9:58 a.m., Danielle entered. Gray blazer. Steady eyes. No briefcase, just one slim folder labeled, Clause 12B, Final. Marcy arrived moments later. Hair in a sleek twist. Expression locked somewhere between courtroom grace and apex predator. At 10:02 a.m., the door creaked again. Rick shuffled in first, his fake grin rigid, eyes scanning for weakness. Still wearing the same worn loafers, still pretending confidence could fill the cracks in his credentials. Brad came next, ashen-faced, sweating, his whole aura screaming 3 sleepless nights. The internal buzz had reached fever pitch. Whispers of legal action. Maybe the SEC. But Brad only heard one word in every hushed hallway: clause. 2 board members followed, older men in cufflinks and subtle frowns, exuding, "Why am I wasting my morning here?" energy. Danielle didn't greet them. Didn't rise. Just glanced at the clock. 10:05. Marcy cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming. Let's begin with a review of a document you should recognize, Clause 12B of your own compliance policy, revised in 2017. Rick smirked. "We're familiar with your interpretation." Marcy raised a single finger. "Not interpretation," she said. "Application." She pulled out a printed copy of the quarterly report. Page 37, circled in red. Then, silently, slid over Danielle's original compliance policy, with Clause 12B highlighted in yellow, annotated with Danielle's initials in the margin. Rick's grin faltered. Brad flinched. The room dropped into an eerie stillness. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Recognition. They'd seen this coming. They just never thought she'd pull the trigger. Marcy leaned forward like adjusting a sniper's scope. Calm. Deadly. This constitutes a material misstatement. You knowingly filed projections that omitted lease liabilities. That misstatement led to departmental restructuring, the termination of my client. Clause 12B applies. As such, my client is owed severance, treble damages, and full legal compensation. Rick opened his mouth, this time slower, more cautious. Even if the clause applies. Marcy didn't let him finish. She slid another document across the table. A company email from Brad. Dated 6 weeks earlier. "I know this version doesn't reflect the leasing obligations. We'll massage that into Q2. The silence turned hard. One of the board members, a man in a tailored gray suit with a gold Montblanc pen, finally spoke. "What, exactly, are you asking for?" Danielle didn't speak. Marcy did. Full enforcement of Clause 12B. Damages totaling $1.47 million. A formal letter acknowledging wrongful restructuring. Confidentiality agreement signed within 10 business days. Brad looked like he was about to vomit. Rick tried to laugh again, but it came out jagged. Croaked. Danielle didn't flinch. She didn't need to posture or threaten. The truth was heavy enough. Then it happened. A sharp, sudden clatter. Brad's coffee mug, branded with some empty corporate motto, slipped from his clammy grip and shattered against the polished marble. Coffee splattered across the floor, dark and accusatory. No one moved. The puddle expanded, silent and damning. Rick's face went from ghostly white to an inflamed red. His mouth opened and shut like a fish caught behind glass. This was the man who'd once scoffed at Clause 12B, dismissing it as a footnote from some forgettable compliance drone. Now that drone had them cornered with their own words, highlighted and time-stamped. Danielle stayed silent. Her stillness louder than any rant. Finally, another board member, Arthur, heavy-set, jowls trembling, turned to Brad. "Is this accurate? Did we submit misleading financials?" Brad stammered. His voice papery. There was context, maybe minor adjustments. But the air had shifted. Because the facts weren't debatable anymore. They were printed, sealed, and sitting in the center of the table. Marcy leaned in, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. Misstatements, not adjustments. Rick attempted to recover, his pen trembling between his fingers like he was trying to defuse a live grenade. "We acknowledge there may have been some miscommunication," he said cautiously. "Perhaps we can resolve this quickly." Marcy froze him mid-sentence. Resolve? Rick coughed, eyes flicking toward Brad, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. We're willing to offer Miss Hartman a 2-month salary package. A gesture of goodwill. Danielle didn't flinch. Not a blink. Not even a raised brow. She had waited too long, endured too much, to respond to something so pathetic. Her calm wasn't passive, it was lethal, like poison laced in a glass of champagne. Marcy leaned into the silence. 2 months, she repeated, tasting the words like they were spoiled. Clause 12B entitles my client to triple damages, full back pay from the date of wrongful termination, legal costs, and a written admission of wrongdoing. 2 months wouldn't cover the cost of the envelope. Arthur cleared his throat, visibly rattled. Triple damages? That feels excessive. Marcy's gaze didn't waver. Your CFO's email shows clear intent to misrepresent liabilities. That's not aggressive. That's fraudulent. Sweat bloomed under Rick's arms. Let's not escalate. Marcy leaned back, fingers steepled like she was planning a quiet assassination. I'm just stating facts. Fraud has consequences. SEC scrutiny. Potential class actions. Shareholder lawsuits. Should I continue? Danielle saw it happen, Brad's eyes darting like a trapped animal, Rick's forced grin now a sickly grimace. One board member, younger, impatient, finally cut in. What's the number? What'll make this go away? Without missing a beat, Marcy slid a document across the table. $1.47 million. Includes legal fees. NDA signed immediately. Formal apology by Friday. Arthur looked at Brad like he'd personally throw him out the window if it would end this. We'll need to discuss. You have 48 hours, Marcy said, rising slowly. Or we file, with exhibits. The words dropped like stones in a still pond. Rick turned pale. Brad looked down at his untouched coffee. Arthur rubbed the bridge of his nose. Danielle sat still, composed, silent. She already knew how this would end. They'd delay. Stall. Threaten. Pretend to have power. But eventually, they'd cave. Because while they'd been playing checkers, Danielle had been playing a very different game. Marcy gave Danielle a small, almost imperceptible look of triumph. Danielle gave the faintest nod in return. The game was over. The board just hadn't figured it out yet. She also knew the ending wouldn't come clean. Men like Brad and Rick didn't go down with grace. They clawed. So when the silence came, Danielle didn't relax. She sharpened her edge. Then came the tactics. Arbitration delays. Useless legal motions. Mountains of junk documents. Designed to bleed her out, financially, emotionally, legally. They had no idea she'd trained for this. Then came the rumors. Marcy caught wind first. Calls from concerned former colleagues. Gossip seated in the right circles. Anonymous HR leaks hinting at performance concerns and compliance flags. Subtle. Venomous. Strategic. Marcy was livid. Danielle wasn't. They're painting you as the bitter ex-employee, Marcy warned. Danielle's voice was calm. Let them. We have Clause 12B. They have hearsay. Each hearing delay. Each desperate clarification attempt. Each revisionist email. It all reeked of panic. They mistook her stillness for surrender, never realizing it was restraint. Then, one rainy evening, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Short message. Check inbox. Final gift. Good luck. She opened her laptop, slow and steady. In her inbox, a forwarded email chain. Subject line, revenue projections, urgent edits. Her breath stayed even as she read. Brad, Rick, and Tyler. Brad, these numbers can't go out as is. Someone will notice. Rick, adjust as needed. The board won't look closely. Tyler, what about compliance? Brad, handled. Danielle won't be an issue after Thursday. Each line. A nail. Buried in their own coffin. She forwarded it to Marcy. One line, courtesy copy to SEC. Marcy replied instantly. Already drafting. By morning, the thread, with an anonymous tip, landed in every board member's inbox. And the SEC's. Then the real panic began. Hours later, Marcy called. Her voice dripping with satisfaction. Emergency board meeting tonight. No delays. It's over. Danielle's reply was barely audible. Good. By 6:14 p.m., Marcy's next message landed. They folded. Full settlement. CFO on leave. Legal counsel terminated. Check incoming. Danielle read it twice. Closed her laptop. Walked to the kitchen. Opened a bottle of wine, real cork this time, no box, and poured a slow, earned glass. The rain had stopped. City lights glowed beyond the window, blurred and gentle. She breathed in deep. No fireworks. No applause. Just quiet. And it was enough. The final conference room was silent. Cold. Danielle sat straight-backed, emotionless, hands folded. Dressed like justice in heels. Marcy beside her, professional and precise. No chaos. No scrambling. Across from them, Arthur looked worn thin. Brad? Missing. Rick? Also gone. In his place, an envelope. Termination effective immediately. Arthur cleared his throat. We've accepted your terms. All documentation is ready. Just need signatures. Danielle didn't move. Marcy reached forward, pen gliding across the paper like a scalpel. Triple damages. Retroactive pay. Full NDA. Formal wrongdoing acknowledgement. Arthur signed next, the pen scraping loud in the quiet. He slid the folder toward them like it stung to touch. Looked at Danielle briefly. Then away. Danielle took the check and agreement with deliberate calm. Rose without a sound. Her silence carried more weight than any outburst ever could. Marcy stood with her, gathering papers, unbothered and victorious. Together, they walked out, heels clicking across polished floors. Into the elevator. It closed around them in mirrored steel. You okay? Marcy asked. Danielle met her eyes in the reflection. Calm. Steady. Deadly. No woman negotiates severance here, she echoed softly. Pause. Then the smile. Guess I just did. The elevator slid down smooth and silent. Like every move Danielle had made. When the doors opened, she stepped into the lobby light, chin high. Vindicated. Whole. The city roared outside. Life went on. Nobody knew. Nobody had to. Because Danielle hadn't come for applause. She came for justice. And she got it, quiet, sharp, complete. They saw her now. They had no choice. And what stays with you most? It's the quiet preparation. The silent, strategic kind of justice. Not rage. Not noise. Just clarity, facts, and an iron resolve. This wasn't revenge. It was precision. Thanks for watching, you sneaky legends. Subscribe and stick around. We've got more corporate karma coming. Because your ex-colleagues won't know what hit them.